Omegle is an interesting place. You can meet all sorts of people and see all sorts of crazy things. I've been told over and over again about how shady the website is. I have experienced some shady things from all the times I've been on that site, but being the overly curious, thrill-seeking teenager, I continued to visit it, sneaking out a laptop and staying up late hours just to see what I could find. It happened one night. I was scrolling through my phone, wide awake, when I decided to try Omegle to cut the boredom. It was around midnight and my parents were dead asleep by then, so I snuck out to my dad's office to use his laptop. I locked the door and tried to be as quiet as possible. I turned on the table lamp and fired up his laptop. For the first hour, I saw the usual stuff, and creepy old men lying in the bed with a camera tilted directly at their hairy chests. I was getting fed up, so I decided to chat with one more person before heading to bed. I had no idea what to expect when I clicked next. The video feed was completely black on the other person's end. I thought that he or she forgot to turn on the webcam, so I typed,
"Your webcam's off."
A few minutes later, the person on the other side replied,
"I can see you."
I looked closely at the screen, and that's when I saw it. Two eyes stared directly back at me from the darkness. It gave me chills once I noticed this, and then suddenly the lights turned on from the other person's end. I saw a girl staring at me. She was dressed like the infamous Annabelle doll. At first, it felt really weird to see her like that, but then I realized how detailed she had been with her makeup. She wore red ribbons on her twin braids with an excessive amount of red blush on her cheeks. Her eyes were done like those anime cartoons which made them appear wide and scary. She watched me without blinking and then slowly smiled. There was something in her smile that didn't feel right. Upon realizing that it had been quite some time since I haven't said a single word to her, I felt embarrassed.
Wow. Hi. You look different.
Do you like it?
The voice that came out of her didn't match her attire at all. It was coarse yet squeaky at the same time, as if she was not using her real voice and trying to be someone else. But anyway, I smiled back and said,
"Yeah, you just shocked me."
I love doing that to people.
She laughed weirdly.
"So what's your name?"
Annabelle? And you are?
"Of course. Well, I'm Justin. How old are you, Annabelle?"
What do you think?
I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell with all that makeup."
Her face suddenly changed. The smile disappeared. She looked me up and down like I've offended her. She brought her face extremely close to the screen and made very creepy eye contact.
"What are you doing?"
Trying to see inside you.
"What?"
She started laughing hysterically. Her behavior made me uncomfortable. For a moment, I thought to disconnect the call and go to bed. But as they say, curiosity kills the cat. I stayed.
So what is your real name?"
She tilted her head to one side and said,
I just told you.
I realized she has no interest in revealing her true identity, so I got quiet. The next question came from her side.
Tell me, Justin, do you like hide and seek?
Such a cliche.
Answer me when I'm asking you a question!
Her sudden scream caught me off guard.
Whoa, why are you screaming at me?
Because I'm real as hell, Justin! You know you're using your dad's office while he's dead asleep! Isn't it true?
How do you know that?
I can see inside your head. I'm Annabelle.
At this point, I had had enough. I went to disconnect the call, but no matter how many times I tried, the site didn't close. Glitches started appearing on the screen, but she stayed right there, watching me with her terrifying grin, carving sick joy from my moment of tension. Suddenly, she took out this big knife.
Wanna see a magic trick?
She got up and walked to the other side of the room. I watched her opening the closet door, followed by the sobbing of a woman. I couldn't see her face, but only heard her scream.
No, please! Let me go! Please! I won't tell anyone!
What happened next will be hard to explain in words. It was insanity. She went full crazy and started stabbing the woman. I could hear the ruthless slashes accompanied by painful sobs. I watched it in horror. My body was paralyzed in fear. I couldn't move no matter how hard I tried. At one point, the woman's sobs died down. The stabbing stopped as well. Then Annabelle turned towards me and she came back to her seat. The bloody knife and her bloody hands made me nauseous. She kept the knife on the desk and brought her face extremely close to the screen.
Wanna see another magic trick, Justin?
I was shivering. Drops of sweat covered my forehead. Annabelle touched her face with her big hands and started rubbing off the makeup on her face. I had no idea something even more shocking was waiting for me. Once the makeup started to come off, the true face appeared. And Annabelle wasn't a woman. She was a full-grown, middle-aged man. His rough, prickly beard surfaced from the white skin.
Happy now, Justin. You wanted to see the real me, right?
I screamed and ran to my parents' bedroom. I kept banging on their door until I fainted. When I woke up the next morning, I was down with a high fever. I couldn't tell my parents exactly what I saw last night. They found me unconscious at their doorstep and my dad's laptop open into a black screen. Days later, I was watching TV before dinner when my dad shifted to the news channel. That's when I saw the man dressed as Annabelle one more time. He was finally on the news. Cops caught him in a shady parking lot. He was trying to dispose of the body of the woman in the dumpster. The psycho cut her body into pieces and threw them around all over the city. When the cops searched his house, they found her head and the rest of her torso. His name was Miles Locker, and he was named the Omegle Killer. He would kidnap random girls and bring them into the apartment, and then dress as some famous movie's character and perform their murder of Omegle. He called himself a true performer, putting up the sickest live show in front of the world. The investigation is still going on. The cops are trying to locate his other victims. I have never been on Omegle since that night.
My name is Pierce. Although I was born in France, my whole family is American. I was always curious about what America could be like, so when I could save enough money, I could plan a big trip that would last a few months, where I could get to know what it's like to live there. My first plans were to stay temporarily in an Airbnb while I looked for a job to go to a better place. I finished settling in pretty quickly. I relaxed in the dining room and turned on the TV for the first time, until to my surprise, someone texted me. When I checked my cell phone, I noticed that the number was American. Who could be talking to me? This was not the Airbnb owner's number, and I still don't know anyone in this country. As confused as I was by this message, when I opened it, all my doubts turned to fear. You are not alone. Get out of there. Was this a threat? Maybe the Airbnb owner gave my phone to a friend and they were playing a joke on me? I decided to ignore him and went to the kitchen to prepare the food when I received another message. Get out of the kitchen now, something bad is about to happen. Okay, this is seriously creepy. How did they know I'm in the kitchen? Does this place have cameras? Ah! Are you sure I'll be alright? Of course. Just take care of your wound. Thanks, Doc. Listen, kid, I don't know why you're covering for whoever did this to you, but I seriously think you should be careful. Stay calm, Doctor. It was just an accident. The knives fell out of... Kid, I'm not judging you. There's no need to lie to me. I've been doing this for a long time. There's no way a falling knife could cause a wound like that. Look how it went through your hand. That could have only been one person who certainly used a lot of force. But just be careful, okay? Yes, doctor. As I walked back to the Airbnb, I couldn't help but be terrified. Who was sending me those messages? Who was trying to hurt me? No one threw those knives at me. How could I have fallen so hard? Confused, I tried to reply to the number that had spoken to me earlier, but no message came through. I arrived back at the Airbnb, and with my hands still sore, I threw myself onto the bed and fell asleep.
Ah!
Terrified, I woke up from one of the most intense nightmares of my life. Not because I dreamt that someone was chasing me, a family member had an accident, or that my teeth fell out. I dreamt that I saw through the eyes of someone who was on my roof, watching me sleep, someone who was slowly approaching me with the intention of hurting me. I looked around, but I was alone. Something was really wrong. There was this smell. It was so intense it almost made me vomit. Anyway, I had to thank my cell phone for waking me up. But when I saw that the number of the message was again the number that had threatened me before, I was not so happy. If you stay in bed, you will die. Get out of there now. This message didn't seem like a threat, more like a warning. I checked the previous messages and they gave me the same impression. Was whoever was sending me the messages trying to protect me? Whatever the case, he was right about the kitchen, so I wasn't going to risk it. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom, also taking the opportunity to brush my teeth. From the bathroom, I heard a strange noise coming from my room, and when I opened the door to investigate what the sound was, my toothbrush fell out of my mouth. The bed was totally destroyed. My cell phone vibrated again, so I took it out of my pocket and read its contents. Come out of the bathroom now. Totally willing to believe this message, I jumped violently out of the bathroom and fell on the floor of my room. Suddenly, the bathroom light broke and the door slammed shut. From inside, violent pounding on the door could be heard. This didn't make any kind of sense. The bathroom was empty a second before, but now there was someone inside, and he was furious. I read the cell phone one more time. Another message had arrived. As if answering my question, I heard a terrifying noise behind me. I looked in the direction of the noise, and there was something or someone crouched at one end of the room. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. His face was pale white, and his body was also white, but there was something wrong. That wasn't a human. It had no nose. Its eyes were moving frenetically from side to side. They were trembling. But worst of all was that smile. That creepy grin from ear to ear. I was perplexed. Suddenly, that strange being stood up and slowly walked toward me. I ignored the cell phone's advice and ran desperately towards the exit. I reached the kitchen and jumped to the exit door. I put my key in, but nothing happened. The door was still locked. I started to inspect it, and to my surprise, a small padlock was locking the door. Where did this come from? I tried to pick the lock, but before I knew it, I heard a sound right behind me. I turned around, and there it was. That strange and horrifying being was behind me. I was locked in. I could do nothing to defend myself. From this distance, I could see his face more than ever. It was as the message said. His eyes were not looking in my direction. They were simply moving all over the place. His mouth opened slowly, as if anticipating that he was very close to me. In his hand, I could see a small kitchen knife that he was probably going to use on me. Crying, I fell to the ground, praying that my death would be as painless as possible. But suddenly, something even stranger happened. When the being was a meter away from me, someone came out of the wall next to me, hugging and holding him. The wall was not broken. It was as if it was suddenly made of rubber band that could be stretched. The figure that was holding him was human. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew this was my only chance to escape. I began to hit the lock violently using my cell phone, destroying it in the process. The lock, which was small and quite weak, gave way, and I took advantage of that moment to escape. All the while, the monster was still pushing hard to get to me. His smile was still intact, and even though he knew he couldn't see me, his eyes went straight in my direction, ignoring the other strange being that was grabbing him. The next day, I tried to avoid the ghost stories and told the owner that someone had invaded the Airbnb the night before. The police came in with us, and immediately they also noticed the rotten smell that I had been feeling all this time. After finding nothing strange in the house, they noticed that the smell was coming from a hole in the wall at the entrance, where the last entity had saved me. The police asked the owner for permission, and after several hours, they pulled down the wall. Behind it was a man trapped in the concrete with multiple stab wounds on his body. Oh God, look at him. This man's been dead for several weeks. The owner recognized the man. He was the previous inhabitant of the Airbnb. The owner thought he had simply left the room for some emergency, as he never responded to him again. None of us understood how the man had gotten there or what had happened to him, but as the police were removing us from the room, I saw the man's hand, and at that moment I understood everything. His hand was tightly clenched around a cell phone, and even though it had been several weeks since his death, the cell phone was still on. I plopped down to my knees, my face covered in mud. Ha! Loser! I looked up just in time to see a football sailing through the air, headed right for my face. It connected with a sickening thud, and I fell backward, stars glittering in my vision. Hey, dweeb! I groaned as someone hauled me to my feet. It was Joey, the school bully. His friends laughed as he shoved me hard, sending me sprawling back into the mud. Why don't you just go crawl back under your rock and die? You're such a freak. No wonder nobody likes you. They kept laughing and jeering as they walked away, leaving me alone and crying in the mud. I'd had enough. Enough of the bullies, the taunting, the feelings like I was worthless. I stood up, wiped the mud off my face, and walked home. I went straight to my room and cried myself to sleep. I was so tired of all of it, of feeling like I had no control over my life. Waking up, I rubbed my eyes as I scrolled through social media. I was sick of it. I was done. I kept browsing the internet, drifting more and more towards the shady side of things. Forums that discussed how to get revenge on your bullies. You know the deal. That's when I saw it. A forum post that detailed how to gain access to the dark web. I was curious, so I clicked the link. It took me to a website with a list of links. I clicked on the first link that caught my interest. Hitman for hire. I was skeptical, but I kept reading. The website claimed that they could remove any problematic people in your life for a price. I thought about my bullies and how good it would feel to see them gone. Besides, one of the packages on the website was free. Problem removal? What does it mean? No further orders applicable? Shrugging, I hit the order button, followed the instructions, and submitted the names and locations of my bullies. I added anyone and everyone I could think of, even Miss Harlington, who had kept me late after school one time to berate me for my low grades. Finally, it had a field for my name and address. I hesitated for only a moment before putting in my information. What did I have to lose? After pushing submit, however, something strange happened. The text hit list appeared at the top of my page with a list of every person I had submitted. The weird part was that my name was at the bottom, listed as a payment for the job. At that moment, though, my mother called me to dinner, and I didn't have time to think about it. Admittedly, I quickly forgot about the website and went on with my life. Days passed, then weeks. I almost forgot about it until one day I noticed something weird. Joey usually waited for me by the school gates to bully me, but today he was nowhere to be seen. In fact, I didn't see Joey or any of his friends for the rest of the day. It was like they had vanished into thin air. I wondered if they were sick or something, but I didn't see them in the halls or in class. It was like they had just disappeared. A chill ran down my spine as I remembered the website. Surely it couldn't be real. Could it? I dismissed the thought and tried to forget about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was only when I entered the class that I found out what was wrong. My teacher stood at her desk, her hair disheveled and her makeup smeared. She looked like she'd been crying.
Class, I have some bad news. It appears that Joey, Sarah, and John have passed away.
I could feel the blood drain from my face as she spoke. They were dead? But how? It couldn't have been the website. Could it have? And I froze as I looked up at Miss Harlington's disheveled face. She was still alive, wasn't she? That meant it wasn't the website. I sighed with relief and opened my book, thinking that the world had done me a good deed for once. But as I began to read, I heard a sudden gasp and a gurgle. Miss Harlington had frozen in place, her hand still holding a glass of coffee which slowly spilled over the desk and dripped onto the floor. The glass shattered as it hit the ground, and I realized with a start that her eyes were wide open and staring straight ahead. Dead. Screaming, I ran from the classroom, my mind racing. It couldn't be the website. It just couldn't be. As I hurried home, however, I suddenly became acutely aware of a vehicle behind me. It had been there for several minutes and seemed to be following me. I quickened my pace, but the car sped up as well. I began to run, but it was of no use. It finally pulled several yards in front of me and stopped. The man who got out of the car was horrifying. There's no other way to put it. He had black hair that stuck out at odd angles like straws and wore a top hat. But what was probably the scariest thing was his mask. It was white with crooked teeth shaped into a mouth, slits for eyes, and painted on eyebrows. Beneath the mouth was a red mark, like a bloody streak. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I was paralyzed with fear. Payments due. What do you mean? Your contract. You ordered a removal and I delivered. Now it's time for payment. But I didn't mean... It doesn't matter what you meant. The contract is binding, and I always collect my payments. No, please, I can't. You made your deal with the devil. Now, it's time to pay up. I finally forced my body to move, turning and running. The man was fast though, and I could hear his footsteps pounding after me, his breathing harsh and ragged. I was running as fast as I could, but it wasn't enough. He tackled me from behind and I hit the ground hard. The last thing I saw was his white grinning mask as he pressed a cloth over my face. I tried to scream, but it was too late. When I awoke, I could see his face leering over me in some sort of basement. He had devices, medical devices, and I was strapped to some sort of table. I tried to scream, but my mouth wouldn't work. All I could do was watch as he approached me with a long, sharp needle, before I blacked out again. When I came to, I was back where he'd tackled me. Groaning, I sat up bewildered as I saw several policemen running toward me. What the? I'm okay now, as okay as I can be. Apparently, I'd been missing for several months, and the police found me after receiving an anonymous tip. I don't know who tipped them off, but I'm just glad to be alive. Well, most of me. I finally understood what type of payment I made. Parts of me are missing. A kidney, my tongue, and something else I don't want to think about. Probably for sale on the black market. My name is Lisa, and like a huge number of people in the United States, I am a very Catholic person. I've been going to church since I was very young, and I can't remember the last Sunday I didn't go to. There were many moments in my life where my belief was tested, even moments where I told myself that nothing was real, but none of these moments tested my faith. They just taught me that just as there is something up there watching over us, there are also cruel and merciless beings who want to drag us down to hell with them. It all started one tragic day when I lost my husband and children in a train accident. Depression took hold of me. My heart was filled with doubts, and none of my friends could lift me. The only thing that remained sacred to me was church, and over time, Father Thomas became the only person I listened to. Father Thomas was a man of faith, a good and generous man who always wanted the best for all those who attended the church. He was also a person of wisdom. It was as if his advice brought my soul back to life. I had no interest in him as a woman, and he had no interest in me. Not in that way. To me, he was a guide. I quickly became obsessed with that church. My friends would tell me that I spent too much time there and that I did nothing but talk about the church or Father Thomas. Part of me thought they were jealous, but I lied to myself. They knew they were right. I just didn't care. I only cared about spending time at the church. As time went on, I realized that Father Thomas was behaving much more strangely than I thought. Every time I went to pick him up, he would come to me. At first, I thought it was a gesture of kindness, but as time went on, I realized that he didn't want me to come into his office. At the time, I thought it was probably for something good, something beyond my comprehension that Thomas didn't want me to get involved with. I thought I didn't have to distrust him no matter what, but after what happened a few days later, I realized that there was a big difference between being devoted and being innocent. Lisa, my daughter, yesterday I noticed that you were spying on me coming into my office. Is there something bothering you? As always, Father Thomas was very attentive, but at the same time imposing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I must admit that I'm a very curious person and I always wanted to see your office. It won't happen again.
You must be careful with curiosity, child, since that's the way the devil usually separates the sheep from the flock.
Yes, I'm sorry, Father.
Don't worry, Lisa. You know what? I can show you my office if you come tonight. You've proven you're a child of God several times, and I'm sure you're ready to know a little bit more about this church and what its walls hide.
Oh, you think so? I don't want to be invasive.
No one is invasive in God's house, Lisa. See you tonight. Excited, I continued with the Mass that Sunday, and in the evening, after lunch, I went into the church. I was afraid it might be a little late, but Father Thomas was there, waiting for me as always with a huge smile on his face. He pointed me in the direction of his office as if he didn't know it. All the way, we walked in silence. Thomas was still with a huge smile, but I felt very uncomfortable. I felt something was wrong, but I refused to follow my instincts. I was in God's house, after all. When we arrived at the office, I entered with great curiosity, and with the door closed, I thought Thomas had come in with me, but to my surprise, I was alone.
Father?
With no answer, I began to examine the office. It seemed totally normal. There was nothing about it that caught my attention, except for one thing. On one side, there was a huge, terrifying painting. I never liked horror movies, but even so, I knew where it was from.
This painting is from that movie. Was it The Nun? What is it doing here?
The picture was terrifying. It seemed that the pale and terrifying nun was looking back at me. I stopped looking at it and headed for the exit, but from 1 second to the next, the lights went out and then came back on. Terrified, my eyes darted around the office until I came across something I would not have liked to see.
No, this can't be possible. This can't be possible.
The nun's painting was still in front of me, but it was empty. The lights went out once more, but the light didn't come back on.
The light switch. It must be here somewhere. Here it is.
Did my eyes see what I saw? No, this has to be a mistake. I had to be hallucinating. I ran towards the exit door. I had to get out of there as soon as possible.
My body, it hurts.
As I looked up in the direction of the attacker, I saw not the nun, but Father Thomas with his characteristic smile.
Father, what is happening?
I warned you, Lisa. Curiosity is how the devil drives the sheep away from the flock.
Are you the devil?
No, Lisa. I'm just a man of faith, just like you. It's just that my faith is placed elsewhere.
What do you mean?
You see, Lisa, I'm not Father Thomas. Father Thomas suffered a small accident several years ago, and although it was very easy to take his place, no one ever met him. Very convenient that the people who knew him also had some accidents, wasn't it?
Why? Why are you doing this?
You see, I believe that the only God that is in contact with man is not up there, Lisa, but down below. I prefer to be devout to him.
What are you drawing on my head? My body hurts so much. I can't move.
I noticed. I think you have a broken leg. The nun has given you a real beating. But this is a good thing. With these marks, she will come looking for you for sure. You will be an excellent sacrifice, Lisa.
This cannot be happening. The nun is a fictional character. She's from a movie.
Yes, from a movie based on a true story, dummy. Didn't you know the Warrens really existed? Oh, she's close. Time to say goodbye, Lisa.
No!
Suddenly, I felt a cold sensation near me. I turned my head, and the nun was standing next to her painting, staring at me. Oh, look at her! Isn't she beautiful? Kill her, nun. This is my sacrifice to you. With these words said, the nun approached me, but suddenly her head turned away. What? No! Get away from me! Get her! The nun stepped in front of Thomas. While the fake father was frozen, unable to move, the nun embraced him and with impossible speed carried him out of the room. I still didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it was my chance to escape. With difficulty, I limped to the exit. That was the last day I went to that church. I never had much more detail about what I experienced that night or told anyone what happened. I am still very much a believer, but I'm less innocent now. That day, I realized that God's house may be sacred, but inside it, there may be unwanted guests. They say there is always more than meets the eye, and I could make a clear example. My name is Dexter, and although today I am an important and renowned scientist, I had a very lonely and traumatic childhood. It wasn't always like that. I used to have 2 parents and an annoying sister, until he took everything from me. For you to understand what happened, I will start from the beginning. It all started the day a strange girl began to stalk me. At first, I was just a little boy genius with a huge lab. I was still very innocent, and I thought it was nothing more than a girl falling for my obvious male charms. But as I said before, there's always more than meets the eye. Together with my sister Dee Dee, we got the girl to meet a boy as strange as she is. I thought it would be the last time I would see her. Little did I know the fate that awaited me. The next day, I got up in a good mood, as I used to get up every day, brushed my teeth and had breakfast, and was on my way to catch the school bus. But on the way to it, I noticed a familiar figure standing 2 houses away, looking at me. It was the girl. Her gaze had not changed. It was still as terrifying and obsessive as before. Her eyes were frozen on me, registering my every move, not blinking in the slightest. I could say I was getting used to this strange look, but there was something different. The girl was covered in blood, all over her rabbit, her arms, her little purple dress, and her face. Blood was everywhere. I quickly got on the bus and went to the back seats. I looked out the window, and the girl was gone. The day passed quickly at school. That encounter with the girl had terrified me, and to top it off, it wasn't over yet. While I was in the classroom, I felt observed. I didn't know where or how, but I knew the girl was around.
Come on, Dexter, you're a genius. You can't be that scared. It's just a girl.
Interrupting my thoughts, I was able to confirm all my suspicions. The strange girl was looking at me from the schoolyard. I could see her through the window. The girl remained for an hour in the same position, frozen, looking at me. When it was recess time, I thought about going to face her and ran straight to the playground. But again, she wasn't there. The rest of the day, I was very worried. Is this something girls used to do? All I knew was that I wanted to go home and lock myself in my lab, where I knew I would be safe. When the bus brought me back, I thought I would stop by the dining room and talk to my father. Dee Dee got off the bus and went straight to the neighbor's house to play with her, so I knew she wouldn't bother me. Hello, Father. You see, there's something I want to talk to you about. I'm a little scared. There's a girl that's stalking me. I know this might be normal, but... Father? Oh! Mother! Mother! Mother, where are you? Something terrible's happened to Daddy! The moment I arrived at this place, I realized that something was happening there too. The clothes were on the floor. My mom would never leave them there. I started to investigate until, unfortunately, I found my mom. She was inside the washing machine. It was spinning with difficulty as if it didn't fit, as if on purpose, my mother's face was looking in my direction, lifeless. I could be a genius child, but nothing could have prepared me to see this. My only reaction was to cry and run desperately to my lab. Once I locked myself in, I felt safe. I had a lot to think about. What was going on? Who could have done this to my parents? Did the girl have something to do with it? My thoughts were interrupted when behind the bookcase that hid my lab, a familiar voice began to shout.
Dexter! Please! Help me! They want to hurt me!
That was Dee Dee's voice. I grabbed my laser gun and went to save her. Ready, I left the lab and went back to my room and immediately saw my sister lying on the floor with her eyes closed. As I approached her, I could tell something wasn't right. And when I realized what it was, I started to cry. Her face was looking up at the ceiling, but her body was face down. Dee Dee was dead. Someone had bent her neck. A quick thought interrupted my tears. That's when the boy genius came back, but at the worst possible time. Wait a minute. Why would Dee Dee ask for my help? She knows how to get into the lab on her own. She doesn't need to hit the bookstore. Maybe this is a trap?
Dexter, please! Help me! Help me! They're trying to hurt me!
Dee Dee's corpse may be next to me, but the voice came from somewhere else. I turned around and standing behind me, next to the shelf of furniture to enter my lab, was the creepy little girl. You did this! Why?
Dexter, please! Help me! Help me! They want to hurt me!
What are you? Suddenly, the girl rushed at me. I pulled out my gun and started shooting her. I no longer cared about what would happen. She had killed my whole family. With great speed, she started running across the room, dodging all my shots, until one hit her in the head, revealing a metal skull behind the skin. It can't be! You're a robot! In a great rush, the creepy girl threw herself at me again, to which I jumped back and took the opportunity to shoot her again. Each shot stunned her and threw her backward. Dominating the situation, I walked toward her, giving her shot after shot. I was no longer sad. I was furious. The last shot made her fall against the wall, and before I fired again, her head exploded. Once the threat had been extinguished, I knelt down and cried as hard as I could. I may have been left alone in the world, and at that moment, I felt broken. But I knew whose technology this was. I knew who could hate me enough to do this. No matter what, I would not let Mandark, my scientific archenemy, get away with this.
Oh, Dee Dee? My love, you're alive! I'm sure you're mad at me, but I assure you I never tried to hurt you. I knew you were going to your friend's house that day, and I knew you'd managed to escape. Dee Dee? This way of moving. You're not Dee Dee. You're a robot.
Dee Dee is no longer with us. Your little friend took care of that. And now I'll see to it that you don't hurt anyone else.
No!
I may have still been trapped in the body of a little boy, but that day, the boy in me died. I was never again going to let anyone hurt me or anyone I loved.
Julian, how many times will I have to tell you to finish your chores?
I screamed at my 10-year-old son, Julian, who, like always, ignored me and kept playing on his laptop. His eyes were locked into the action. Comments scrolled down the side of the screen in a chat box. I yelled again.
Julian, can you stop your game for a minute?
What is it, Mom?
He went on playing without looking at me. Being a single mom, I could hardly get tough on Julian. Since the day he came into my life, an epitome of affection and care occupied my heart. I can't get angry with him because he is my life, so I try to discipline him with telling him scary stories. He grew up listening to my stories about children who encountered witches, ghosts, werewolves, and trolls. Like many generations of parents, I used scary stories to reinforce morals and teach lessons about safety. Single moms like me should use all the parenting tools they can.
Do you know this story about a boy who was obsessed with online gaming?
Mom, is this another one of your scary stories?
I laughed and said,
Why? You don't like them anymore?
He shrugged his shoulders carelessly and said,
Well, they don't scare me anymore. They just seem silly now.
I see. Well, I won't tell you this one then, because it will scare you to sleep.
Julian looked at me with a confused face. Maybe he was thinking about whether he should listen to it or not, but then he said confidently,
Tell me.
I asked with a frown.
Are you sure?
He closed the laptop, gave his full attention to my face, and said,
Mom, I can handle it.
Fine then. Let's begin.
Once there was a boy named Paxton. He loved playing video games online. He would spend hours and hours of his days in his room with his computer. One day, he was playing with some random strangers online when one of them texted him in the game chat box. He introduced himself as a high schooler named Kyle. Paxton began talking to him. After a few minutes of small talk, Kyle made a weird request to Paxton. He said he will give Paxton some extra life to go ahead in the game if Paxton shares his address with him. It was a survival game, and Paxton was an inch away from making a new record. So, he quickly agreed. He gave Kyle his full address and got the level ups promised by him. Julian's eyes were all wide now. I could see the tension slowly building up on his face.
Do you think Paxton did the right thing?
I asked to ignite the terror just a little bit.
What? No, of course not. He should have never shared personal information online.
Good that you understand this, but unfortunately, Paxton didn't.
He played for more hours, but Kyle didn't text him anymore. Thinking he was offline, Paxton went to bed after a while. He woke up in the middle of the night, hearing a loud dragging sound from his parents' room. He got out of his bed and walked to their room. He found the room door closed, so he knocked.
Mom? Dad? Is everything all right?
He asked. Soon, he heard his mom's voice from the other side of the door.
Yes, dear. Your dad and I are shifting some furniture. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Paxton went back to bed. In the next few minutes, he heard squishy sounds followed by loud thuds hitting the floor. All of them were coming from his parents' bedroom. He got up once again, closed his bedroom door, and went back to sleep. Just as he closed his eyes, he heard his mom knocking on his door.
Oh, Paxton. Are you asleep already?
He got furious now. He stormed out of his room, and as he opened the door, he noticed his parents' room right opposite of him. Their room was fully visible now. There were trails of blood on the floor, like someone dragged a bloody mess from one room to the other. Their bed was messed up with pillows lying on the floor. Paxton called out to his mother in fear. He felt something was wrong in the house, but his mom didn't answer this time. Suddenly, he heard a thudding sound of something dropping on the floor and turned around. He saw this woman dressed in a blue midi dress standing behind him. She had a bloody knife in her hand, and 2 severed heads lay on the floor right next to her. The heads belonged to Paxton's parents. The woman had murdered his parents and was conversing with Paxton, pretending to be his mom. Paxton went to scream, but the woman lunged at him and stabbed him as well. Once she was done killing the entire family, she started robbing the house. She brought bags with her, which she was filling with everything expensive she could find around. She was almost done when the lightning struck outside and a crying whimper of a newborn hit her ears. She stopped and looked to her left. All this time, the woman had no idea that there was another living soul in this house. She once again grabbed her knife and made her way into the room. Upon entering, she found this newborn lying inside a crib. The baby looked at her and their eyes met. For the first time in her life, the woman felt waves of affection in her heart. She dropped the knife and picked up the baby. As soon as she took the baby into her arms, he stopped crying and let out a comforting smile. She wiped her bloody hands on the blanket so she could caress the baby's cheek.
Hello, little man.
She whispered in an unknown joy. The deadly rage of brutality in her got replaced by love and care. She walked out of the room, took the baby home, and him as her own. As I finished my story, I could see Julian's face already puffed up in terror. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and said,
That's just a story, right? No way that's true.
Maybe. I can tell you what you named that baby.
What?
Julian.
I watched my son begin to shake in horror. His hands trembled, eyes stopped blinking. His heartbeat got faster, and in a stammering voice he said,
But, Mom, my name is Julian.
I gave him an affectionate smile, caressed his cheeks, and whispered,
I know, son. I'm the one who named you.
Julian ran into his room in sobs. He will be all right in the morning once I tell him it was a made-up story. But today, a heavy weight got off my chest. At least I can die in peace now. Be it through a story, at least I tried my best to give Julian an idea of what happened to his real family.
I met a guy named Jason on Tinder one night. In minutes, he accepts me and we started planning our date. Jason said he lives on the outskirts and would happily send a cab for me to pick me up for dinner tomorrow night. He sounded rich, so I said yes. I wore my most beautiful red dress, with my hair tied up so he can get a good look at my pretty face. I matched them with red heels so when I walk, he gets the full package. Around 7:30, a black Mercedes stops outside my house. The driver took me to the big villa on top of the hill. Jason was waiting for me at the door. Hey, Sydney. Hope you felt comfortable.
Oh, heck yeah. Your car is bigger than my apartment for sure.
Cute humor. Come on in. There was something about the way he spoke that felt odd. Yet, I smiled and followed him into the house. Jason and I have been matched for a Tinder date. I've never been to a house like that before. It had everything. A swimming pool, fireplace, chandelier, open kitchen, everything. Jason poured 2 glasses of wine and we sat down at the dinner table. I started gobbling the food as it was so delicious, but after 3 to 4 mouthfuls, my head started to feel weird. My vision was blurring and I could see a huge grin on Jason's face.
What's in the food?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Oh, God. What's happening to me?
Mine is Friday the 13th. I woke up in a room with red lights. I could feel my body strapped and tied to an operating table. Suddenly, I heard a rustling sound of metal and saw Jason sharpening his knife standing near my feet. His face was hidden behind a hockey mask, but I could still see his evil eyes peeking at me. I screamed and tried to move my body. It was too late. He came closer holding the knife. It came down to my neck and I knew that this is the end for me. And I heard a gunshot followed by a girl's scream.
Die, you pig!
Jason's body fell to the floor and smoke started coming out of his face. A girl rushed towards me, and she was missing an arm.
I'm Riley. This butcher took my arm and kept me locked in for days. Come on, we need to get out of here.
We were shaking, waiting outside in the cold, but staying inside didn't feel like a good idea anymore. The cops arrived and get us the medical care we need, but the biggest shock of my life came afterwards. When the police searched Jason's house, they didn't find his body. It was like he was never shot. Riley left for the hospital and I was escorted home safely. I deleted my Tinder account and swear to never go on dates with strangers. When I threw myself into my bed, I drowned in sleep immediately. I woke up hearing a glass break. I don't have Nay a pet, so my face turned pale with fear. I slowly looked out my window, and there he was, Jason, trying to get inside the house. He was already twisting the window lock to open it. I ran out of the room and heard a huge breaking sound behind me. Oh my God, he's inside. I hid under the kitchen table, but I could still see him below the knee. He walked to the kitchen and started scanning his surroundings. Oh, Sydney, do you want to play hide and seek? Fine then, my turn. I put my hand on my mouth not to make any sound. He closer to the kitchen table, and suddenly his strong hands pulled me by the hair, and I was once again in his grasp. He had a tight grip that was paining like hell. I knew he is going to end my life, so without thinking, I reached for the knives on the kitchen desk. I managed to grab one after a lot of trouble and stabbed Jason in the chest before he could stab me. He passed out in my kitchen and rushed to my neighbors. I told them everything and they called the cops, but when the cops searched the house, they returned empty-handed once again. Jason's body was nowhere to be found. I was pretty sure that Jason is not a human being, otherwise surviving 2 times from death is not logically possible. My neighbors told me to stay with them for a couple of days, but I didn't want to live in fear. I kept my doors and windows locked for 3 days and nothing happened. On the 4th night, it was raining heavily when my doorbell rang. I didn't open it right away.
Who is it?
It's Bobby! Open the door, Sid! What is Bobby doing here? We had a bad breakup, but I kinda liked him. I opened the door and got in all drenched with a backpack. He hugged me, saying, I was so worried about you. I heard about everything. Just let me stay with you a couple days, okay?
Fine.
Seriously, I was really scared to live alone at that time. We had a nice dinner and Bobby and I smoked a bit. It was like the college days again. After a lot of lovemaking, we went to bed. This time, I didn't wake up to any sound or disturbance. I just woke up. But something was weird again. Bobby was not on the bed. I came out to the living room calling out to him when I saw him lying on the couch. I walked close and turned on the lamp. He was dead. Someone broke his neck, but there was a small pen drive on his forehead with a note, "Play me." I did play. Someone was filming me and Bobby just a few hours ago. Bobby was sitting beside me searching for something in his backpack, and then he found it. It was a gun. He pointed it to my passed out face, and just when he was about to pull the trigger, the maker of the video took him to buy his neck. The screen turned black. Then the camera turned into selfie mode, and I saw the man behind the camera. It was Jason. He raised his hand holding a white note, then walked Bobby's dead body and opened his mouth. He put the note in and closed it and left. The video ended. The fact that Bobby came to kill me and pin it on Jason is a shocking truth. But the fact that Jason saved my life because he wants to end it with his own hands gives me no sleep at night. Hiroshi stared at the couch, eyes half-lidded. I need to get home. I feel so drunk. Well, if you're gonna drive, you should at least get some coffee. Fine. Let's go to our usual breakfast at Wendy's. I drove through the deserted streets and to one of the few places open at this hour. As we pulled into the Wendy's, we saw a single car parked there, just a small black van. It was ordinary, except for the fact that the back passenger door on the right side was open. There was no one in sight. "Creepy," muttered Hiroshi as I parked several spots away from the car. A drunk probably just forgot to close it. "Sounds like something you do." "Oh, shut up," I replied. I stepped out of the car and made it a point to close the door as theatrically as possible. It slammed shut with a loud thud that resonated in the empty lot. We stepped inside and were greeted by a woman in her late 40s. Pamela was written on her name tag. I was a little surprised because we eat at Wendy's every single morning, but I never saw her, not even yesterday. But then, I thought she might be new to the graveyard shift. She smiled at us and said,
Since you're the only customer here, why don't I give you guys some special treatment?
None of us expected the waitress to flirt like that. We were drunk, so we kind of enjoyed her attention. I nodded my head and Pamela escorted us to our seats.
I'll give you a minute,
she said, before turning on her heels and walking into the kitchen. From the corner of my eyes, I could see her staring at Hiroshi. I was looking through the options on the menu board when Hiroshi said, "Isn't she being too nice?" "Well, she is clearly into me." I laughed.
What'll it be?
Pamela asked suddenly. I hadn't even heard her come up. Hiroshi smiled awkwardly. "One Baconator, please." She scribbled down her order on a notepad. Her hand moved in quick, jagged motions. "And could I have some coffee?" I added. She stared at me coldly.
No.
"No," I replied.
You didn't want anything earlier when I asked. You're not getting any now.
I couldn't tell if she was serious or just cracking a practical joke. I looked at Hiroshi. He was shocked too. My friend wasn't sure back then. Could you bring coffee for both of us?" he asked. Once he said this, Pamela's attitude changed. Her gaze softened, her voice became lighter, and her frown was replaced by a subtle smile.
Anything for you, dear,
she said with a creepy smile. She walked away. "I don't think the server likes you very much. She's only being nice to you because you're sitting next to me. She likes me." "Yeah, that's what you said about Samantha, too. Remind me again, who closed the deal with her?" I got quiet with Hiroshi's taunt. I liked Samantha, but she, too, chose him. "Jerk," I mumbled. Pamela came back with 2 cups of coffee. She stretched her arms over the table and set them both in front of Hiroshi. She then placed a hand on his shoulder and looked at him in the eyes.
Here you go, dear,
she said, before pulling away. Hiroshi thanked her, then waited for her to be out of sight before handing me the extra cup of coffee. Again, I wasn't sure whether Pamela was serious or messing with us. Her rude behavior was either teeming with playful sarcasm or genuine. Whichever it was making me feel a little tense. I felt like I had to walk on eggshells around her. I wondered if she was treating her other customers the same way, but when I glanced over at the other tables, I remembered we were alone. "She's being weird, right?" I asked. It's 4:30. She's probably been here all night and wants to go home. Give her some slack. I mean, she works the night shift at Pamela's, for crying out loud. We're lucky she hasn't flipped us off and walked off yet." Hiroshi brought the cup of coffee to his face and inhaled the fumes. I could see a sparkle of glee twinkling in his eyes as he took a sip. It was exactly what he needed. Pamela came back and put the burger in the middle. We decided to share. I was eating in peace until I spotted Pamela looking at us from across the counter. There was something about the way she did it that made me nervous. She didn't have the attentive gaze of someone checking on us. No, there was something more aggressive about it, something almost predatory. It gave me the creeps. Hiroshi pushed his plate away and then cracked his back. Yeah, that's just what I needed. I was done with the creepy waitress watching us, so I made the first move. I wandered to the register and Hiroshi followed. I took out my wallet to pay her, but she completely ignored me and shifted her eyes at Hiroshi.
Leaving so soon, dear?
She asked, making no effort to hide the fact that she was addressing Hiroshi and Hiroshi alone. He smiled. Sorry, honey. Wish we could stick around longer, but we need to beat rush hour traffic. He joked. She put her hand on his forearm and smiled back at him.
How sad. I thought I could talk to you alone for once.
And then gave me a death stare to imply I was being the third wheel. Then, she did something which I didn't expect. She leaned onto the counter, brought her face extremely close to Hiroshi, and bit Hiroshi's cheek.
Stop! Stop!
I was paranoid by the sight. Pamela was biting Hiroshi's cheek like a mad dog, her teeth piercing his skin, making him bleed terribly. He started pushing her away, throwing his hands in the air, screaming like a timid rabbit, but Pamela didn't let him go. Pamela suddenly let him go, but grabbed his shirt so he couldn't escape. She turned her bloody face towards me and yelled,
Don't you dare come between us, or I'll shoot you!
She took out a gun and pointed it at me. I raised my arms, gesturing I surrendered.
So, are you having fun now, dear?
Who are you?
You won't recognize me, but I'm sure you will remember my daughter, Samantha.
What? You're Samantha's mom?
Damn right I am. I have been searching for you for the last week. You broke Samantha's heart. You played with her feelings just to get laid. It's because of you she killed herself. Are you enjoying my company now? Huh?
I wasn't ready for what happened next. She pushed Hiroshi away and then raised her gun at him. A loud gunshot took place, followed by a thud. I collapsed on the ground, covering my ears, and heard running footsteps along with a car picking up high speed. When I opened my eyes, everything was over. Pamela was gone, so was the black van outside. Hiroshi's body was lying lifeless on the floor in a pool of blood. I somehow managed to call the cops. They're on their way. I now notice the pair of legs peeking from the doorway of the kitchen. This must be the real employees of this Wendy's.
Hey guys, my name is Lucas. Maybe many of you know me from the golden age of YouTube pranksters when channels were dedicated to making pranks on the street, online games, or platforms like Omegle. I belonged to the latter, and oh boy, it was a blast. I used to be the king of the jokes on Omegle. I laughed at the poor person who had the bad luck to meet me. But one day, the one who had the bad luck was me, as I encountered something far beyond my comprehension, something that was just evil. That day, I was recording one of my YouTube videos. The joke was based on the fact that when a person would see me, they would see me with a Shrek filter. After a few seconds, a jump scare of a nightmarish version of Shrek would appear and the person would have the scare of his life. Everything started great. I was getting some good reactions from people. But suddenly, a girl appeared on the camera.
Hey, do you like my doll?
Yes, I love your doll. Do you like Shrek?
Shrek is very cute. Hey, would you like to play with my doll?
Of all the reactions I had seen, this was the one that surprised me the most. The girl had not reacted at all to the jump scare. It was as if she didn't care at all that I tried to scare her. All she did was talk to me about the scary doll that was rocking in a chair behind her. I'm not going to lie, the doll was terrifying. At first glance, it looked like a simple doll, very much like the one in Annabelle movies, but not the Hollywood version, but the real one. The girl was terrified. She was crying her eyes out, but she looked at me with a big smile, as if acting like everything was okay. Honestly, the first thing that popped into my head was that she was another YouTuber, so I laughed and played along.
Of course I'd love to play a game with your doll. What do you like to play? Poker, Need for Speed, or maybe a soccer game?
You'll see. Tell me, would you like to keep my doll?
Of course. I wouldn't know how you'd send her to me. Are you flirting?
Say it! Say you'd like to keep my doll!
At that moment, I got a little scared, but I decided to go on with the joke. I was still filming, and this was still great content, even if it was at my expense.
I'd like to keep your doll.
Oh my god! You have no idea how sorry I am, but it's your problem now.
And without another word, the girl closed Omegle.
Wow, that happened.
I must admit that I was a little uncomfortable with the previous girl. but I was sure that in just a matter of days, I would find myself in some horror video compilation with funny reactions. That thought calmed me down. When the next camera appeared, I continued with my Shrek routine. I scared some teenagers with the jump scare. They took it well enough and laughed, but when one of them spoke to me, my blood ran cold.
Dude, you're going all in. You even have that scary doll behind you.
Seeing my camera, I was terrified. The same doll that was with the previous girl was on top of my bed. I quickly turned around to look at my camera, but nothing was there.
Oh, good job, guys. You're with the previous girl, aren't you? Have I been hacked? Nice one! We won't fall for that one. Come on, guys, the joke is basic. I've seen it in several videos.
Without giving them a chance to answer me, I moved on to the next camera, but the doll was still there. I restarted my Omegle browser, closed and opened the tab, but nothing changed. The doll was on my bed. Thinking of a quick solution, I opened my webcam from the computer, and when I saw the doll in the same position, I was perplexed.
What kind of hacking is this?
Without realizing it, I must admit that this scared me a lot more than I thought it would. I unplugged the power supply from the computer and went to the closet to fix the slippers I had dropped. Once I finished, I went back to my computer with the plan of reconnecting it. Maybe the hacking problem was already solved, but to my surprise, something else happened. The computer was not only on, but it had an Omegle chat open. My camera was on, but the other person was off.
This can't be.
Do you still think this is a hack, Lucas?
How do you know my name?
I didn't come to explain things. I came to play. That's what you wanted, right?
No, I don't want that.
Hey, would you like to play with my doll?
Of course I'd love to play a game with your doll. What do you like to play? Poker, Need for Speed, or maybe a soccer game? Who are you?
Just someone who wants to play, Lucas.
And what do you want to play?
Since you're so fond of asking questions, we'll play a quiz. You can start.
Leave me alone. Please.
Come on, Lucas. It's just a game. Play.
What if I walk out the door?
Lucas, I won't answer that question, because I'd like to see you try. It's my turn. Do you know where I am now?
I don't know.
Come on. Yes, you do.
You're in my bed.
I congratulate you. I knew you had it in you. Do you think you'll survive tonight?
I thought it was my turn to ask.
You thought wrong. Do you think you'll survive tonight?
Yes. Ah!
I told you, it's not good to lie.
Please, let me go.
Let's play another game. Do you remember the girl who was with me before? You'll be her.
Please, I don't want anyone else to go through this.
For every camera you pass without them agreeing to stay with me, I'll take one step closer to you. If I get to where you are, you lose.
No, I won't do this to anyone.
Turn around, Lucas.
As I turned around, a black shadow stood in the doorway of my room. I couldn't make it out, but it was huge and intimidating. It had a human silhouette, and I could recognize a hospital gown.
From now on, you can't turn around again. But I assure you that with each camera, I will be closer to you. Let the game begin.
Immediately after saying these words, the first camera was activated and some girls appeared.
Hey, girls, do you like my doll?
Freak.
Every time I said this, people rejected me. Some would freak out, others would scoff. None of it mattered. The only thing I could think about was that every second that passed, I could feel something behind me getting closer. My skin crawled with each person who jumped me, and I felt colder and colder. At the last one, I could feel him behind me, breathing violently. I could feel his smile without even seeing it. I couldn't breathe from the terror. I could hardly pronounce the words anymore.
Hey guys, you like my doll? Hey, we love it almost as much as your mom. Great, would you like to play with her? With your mom or with the doll? With both. Say, you want to keep my doll? What a weirdo. Goodbye, nerd. I want to keep his doll.
As soon as the boy skipped me, I could hear the thing behind me approach me one last time. There were no cameras. The game was over.
Don't hurt me. I won the game, and one of the men said he wanted to stay with you.
After a few seconds of silence, I heard a voice in my ear.
The fun we would have had together.
And suddenly, the cold was gone. I turned around behind me, and there was no one. I looked at the bed, and the doll was gone. I looked at the monitor, and the computer had turned off. Finally, it was over. After that day, I could never log in to Omegle again. I told my friends about it and made several YouTube videos, but no one ever believed me. It died as another internet urban legend. As time went by, the Omegle pranksters stopped being popular. Even though horror channels are more successful than ever, I decided not to join that trend. I had already seen more horror in 1 hour than I wanted to see in my entire life.
So, you're Joey, right?
Yes?
What do you want from me? Your strange story. The reason you're here.
It's happening again, isn't it?
I want you to see this picture, Joey. You see, you caught the attention of a lot of people here. It turns out that Jeff, your doctor, is my cousin, and your story is very similar to the one this man told before he died.
Something about a game. Sad Satan.
Exactly. I need you to tell us how you ended up here, Joey. Tell us the truth in detail. Take all the time you need.
You won't believe me. We'll give it a try. Okay. It all started 5 years ago.
At the time, I had a successful YouTube channel that dealt with urban legends, creepypastas, and paranormal activity. At the time, horror games were very popular. Sonic.exe, Pokemon's Cursed Graveyard, and Mickey's Horror Games. The algorithm heavily favored those who wrote about those topics. At first, I was happy to just be another YouTuber talking about it, but as time went on, things started to change. People were asking me more and more to touch on deeper topics and more terrifying stories, so I started exploring the deep web. That's where I came across Sad Satan. Sad Satan is not only another one of those horror games, but it's a game taken from the deep web. At the time, the game could only be downloaded from there, and when you started playing it, you discovered that something is wrong. The game is full of images of real serial killers and their victims. Today, there are many censored versions, but I had not only obtained a copy of the original, but I had information on how to discover the real Sad Satan game. Needless to say, I couldn't miss this opportunity. I had to play it. Before I did, I was told to be open to everything I could see, to follow the rules and nothing would happen to me, to stay calm. I started to record the screen, and after making my introduction, I started to play it. At first, I lived the normal experience, advancing through the maze in the game by seeing some terrifying images and interacting with everything I could and reacting to them. But after a while, I decided to play the real game. I got my character to a point that I can't tell you about and started following the instructions of the viewer that the game sent me. 6 steps to the left, 1 step up, 6 steps to the right, 13 steps back, and pause. I must admit that I didn't expect this to work, but it did. Instead of the pause screen, the game froze, and, as if stuck coming from another game, a note appeared. Turn off the lights in your room. Light the candle. Turn off the kitchen lights. Walk back. Surprised but excited, I decided to heed this. I couldn't record it since the camera was on the computer, but my room faced the kitchen, so everything would be recorded. Okay, here goes nothing. Very attentively, I started to walk towards the switch in my room. I turned it off, then I approached the kitchen. For the moment, I felt nothing. I knew that the fear I had was the work of my imagination, but I couldn't help but feel it. I took a deep breath and lit the candle. After that, with an impulse of courage, I turned off the kitchen light. The trip back to my room was terrifying. The darkness began to take effect on me. Since I had the candle burning in my hands, my eyes did not adapt to the gloom, so everything around me was pure darkness. If a rule had not been that I had to walk back, I would have run to the computer light as fast as possible. When I got to my computer again, the note had changed. The lines from before were all crossed out, except for the last two. But I already turned off the lights in the... I recognized that noise. That was the kitchen switch. I turned around again and the kitchen lights were on. Was it a fluke? The kitchen lights never failed, let alone at a time like this. Something strange was going on. With the candle in my hand, I tried to stay calm and went back to the kitchen. I turned off the light, and with the candle in my hand, I started walking back to my room. On this trip, though, something had changed. I felt something walking with me, but I couldn't see it. I then felt a breath on my shoulder, and I had goosebumps. I started to get dizzy. Each step was harder than the next. I think I was having a panic attack. I was a few steps away from my chair, but I felt that I would never get there. Something would catch me before. Something would hurt me. I walked with more speed the last few steps, and almost with a jump, I sat down. After taking a deep breath, I read the letter again. It had changed again. Don't light the candle again. Don't scream or move, it can't see you. Run to the lights, uninstall the game. Don't light the candle again? Just for a second, I saw that. I saw something approach and blow out the candle. My first impulse was to scream, run, hide, and even throw the keyboard at it, but I knew my only chance of survival was to follow the rules. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I could feel that being almost in my face, its putrid breath telling me that its mouth was open, that it was in front of me. It might not have seen me, but I definitely sensed it was there. My body remained frozen, but my heart felt like it wanted to leave my body as the being's breath bounced closer and closer to my cheek. Suddenly, I stopped feeling the breath and heard footsteps behind me heading towards the bed. Run for the lights. This was perhaps my only chance. Desperate and almost falling over, I jumped out of my chair and ran towards the lights. I could feel something coming rapidly in my direction, catching me in almost a split second, but in one leap. I reached the switch. When the lights came on, there was nothing behind me. I ran to the kitchen lights and turned them on. It was all over. Following the last rule, I uninstalled the game from my computer. I started laughing like a psychopath while crying. I had done it. Are you telling me that you have a recording of this? No, I don't have any recordings. When I checked my computer later, I discovered that I'd never started recording. Have you forgotten to do it? No. I started the recording and double-checked, but according to my computer, none of it actually happened. And how did you end up here? You see, it turns out that you can't open a door to another world and just close it. From that day on, I never felt alone again. That thing was with me that night, comes with me, and when it's dark, it always tries to take me away. Why do you think I came here on my own? Here, the lights are always on. Okay, I think we've heard enough. Nice story, kid. Hey! Pass it on to the news, tell your kids, and put it on the internet. No one should play Sad Satan. That game is cursed. Understand? Of course, kid. Ah! What happened? I don't know. The power went out. And the generators. This has never happened before. Open the door! Hey guys, my name is Edward, and I'm a fan of uncovering the secrets of the deep web. Before you think I'm a psychopath, rest assured, I don't like anything that goes on there. I'm not in favor of kidnapping, arms dealing, or red rooms. Nowadays, I'm a white hat hacker. You know, those hackers experts in computer security who are dedicated to sinking those users who enter the deep web with bad intentions. But before I became a computer expert, before I roamed the deep web hunting for potential hijackers, I was just another user of the simplest levels of the deep web. At that time, I also knew a lot about computers, but I was naive and didn't understand the risks I was exposing myself to by being there, and that would have its price. Late 2017. Everyone was obsessed with the mystery boxes on the deep web. I was one of them. So I logged onto a site of dubious precedence, left my personal information, paid for the box, and waited patiently for it to arrive. During that time, I was very afraid that it was all a fraud. In the best case scenario, the box would not arrive. That was not what worried me. What scared me was that they would come to kidnap me and my family. I was terrified. I should have never shared my information like that. To my surprise, a few days later, no one kidnapped me. Better yet, the box had arrived. The box was huge, and unlike many others I see on the internet, it was not decorated. Many people put question marks on them or filled them with spider webs. This was not the case. It was just a huge brown box of poor quality. Today, many people ask me why I didn't film this or upload anything to YouTube. The answer is simple. I'm not interested in fame. I was only interested in opening the box and experiencing what was inside, whether I get ripped off or not. Upon opening it, I must admit I was a little disappointed. In the box were fake skulls, bats, knives, and ropes, all items that a kidnapper might have. But at the same time, you know that they're generic things that everyone could buy anywhere. But in the middle of the things, as if unobtrusively, there was something else. I still don't understand why. The small French blue bell wrapped in a cloth caught my attention. Upon inspecting it, I rang it. It worked perfectly. The bell transmitted something strange to me, a very strange feeling of discomfort, as if I shouldn't have it in my hands. I was about to wrap it again when on its cloth, I noticed that there was something written. Those of you who have justly acquired the bell, rejoice, for you've just earned his favor and his blessing. The Watcher will come for you, and I will lead you to feel absolute bliss, the strongest emotions, and the most unattainable pleasures. Somewhat disturbed by what I had just read, I put the bell back where it was and began to put everything in the box. I left the box in the corner of my room and left. Since I was on vacation, I didn't have to go to work, so with a big smile, I went to make myself something to eat. When I got to the kitchen, I heard a noise coming from the bedroom. And as soon as I turned around to see if something had fallen, I saw it for the first time. The room that I had just left was dark. The lights had gone out on their own, but that wasn't all. I strained my eyes because I knew something was there, and when I realized it, I wish I hadn't. 2 white dots were more than 2 feet away. 2 white dots were more than 2 meters above the ground, pointing at me. Were they eyes? No human has eyes like that. When my vision cleared, I began to discover a silhouette. The thing staring at me was human-shaped. He was standing, dressed all in black with a hood that didn't reveal his face. His whole body was covered by a huge closed jacket. Its body was too thin and tall, but it seemed to be attached. This could look like a human, but it was not. I thought about turning and running, but I couldn't. My whole body froze with fear. I couldn't move. Little by little, I began to feel sadder and more desperate. I wanted to cry. I wanted to throw myself out of a window. What was happening to me? These feelings were not mine. It was as if something in the look of that being made me feel this way. I gathered all my energy and ran as far as I could, escaping from that horrible encounter. From that day on, I began to experience a living nightmare. That being was not only in my house, he was everywhere. Wherever he was, I would suddenly start to feel sad and get depressed. When this happened, I knew that if I looked for a dark place, I would see him there, hiding in the shadows, watching me. To make it worse, I was the only person who could see him. I felt like I was going crazy. This went on for several days, and I could never get used to it because it got worse and worse. As he was getting closer and closer, the feelings were getting stronger and stronger. The worst day of all hadn't started so badly. I had fallen asleep that day, which was a great achievement. When I woke up, it was still dark. I was sleeping with all the lights on, but the moment I looked up surprised that they were all off, I knew something bad was about to happen. I tried to move my body to get out of my bed, but something was wrong. My body was not reacting. Something strange was happening again. Suddenly, I could only look ahead to where my closet was, and to my absolute terror, it started to open, revealing a creepy figure inside.
Who are you? Why are you doing this to me? What do you want?
With no answer, the eye staring at me from inside the closet began to move forward. Wriggling out of the closet, I could see him for the first time without a jacket. His body was gray and full of bandages. His mouth was small, barely visible, and the rest of his body was filled with wounds and craters. Before I could see him any further, he threw himself at me at an inhuman speed, walking at high velocity and contorting his body with every step he took.
Oh my God! What was that? It felt so real.
Still nervous, still trembling with fear, I saw it in the distance. The lights were still all off, just like in my dream. But that being was in the distance, watching me. At that moment, I turned all my hatred, all my anger into energy, and charged towards it. Maybe I could push him away. Maybe I could fight him. Or perhaps he would kill me, and all this torture would end at that moment. But nothing happened. When I got to where he was, there was absolutely nothing.
It can't be. He was just here. At what point did I lose sight of him?
And that was my last attempt to fight it. That day, at that moment, I knew I couldn't do anything against him, but also, I saw something else. The bell. Just in case, I had thrown away the box and all its contents a few days before. I was suspicious of that bell, so I made sure it was in there. While looking for the being in the darkness, I had seen it on the floor, in the same place where this being was standing a few seconds before. That day, I understood everything. I would not be able to get rid of it. I would not be able to throw it away or destroy it. Someone else had to take it over. Someone else would have to acquire it fair and square. The same way I got it, I sold it to another unsuspecting person on the deep web. Surely it had reached another curious man like me, who will send it to someone else, or I don't want to think about what this being will do to him, because he would have done it to me too. From that day on, my interest in the deep web did not go away, but it intensified. I never tried to find out anything about that bell. I felt that if I looked for it, I would attract that being again. What I did look for were ways to protect people from these traps. I ended up becoming an expert in computer security in these 5 arduous years, and today, I dedicate myself to patrolling the deep web, hacking those who are doing something bad, but scaring the unwary kids who don't know what they're doing. They're afraid of me, but I know I'm protecting them from themselves. I'm a writer by profession, and I often set out to remote locations to work in peace and serenity. I've stayed in quite spooky places all by myself and never regretted the experience until this one time. Last summer, I booked an Airbnb facing a big blue lake. The view was breathtaking, and it was the quietest place I have ever stayed. There was no other house nearby. The owner, let's call him Steve for the sake of this story, handed me the keys and left his number for further assistance. The B&B was a 2-story cabin, perfect for any solo traveler. I decided to sleep in the upstairs bedroom because it had a balcony facing the water body. It was the perfect place to write stories. The bright moonlight reflected on the lake water. I was so into my work that I forgot it was past my dinner time. I may be concentrating too hard when suddenly I felt someone's breath behind my neck. I quickly turned around and realized I am in the middle of nowhere. No way there could be someone else in this house. Thinking it was a trick my mind played on me, I brushed off the incident. After dinner, I switched off the room lights and went to bed. The moonlight coming from the balcony illuminated the room enough to see in the dark. I don't recall what time it was, but I woke up drenched in sweat. The room was too hot all of a sudden. I wiped my face in a drowsy state of mind and slowly opened my eyes. With my blurry vision, I saw an old lady sitting on my bed. Her face was white as a blank sheet. She was staring at me with an expressionless face. Before I could contemplate the thought of how she got inside the house, she opened her mouth and vomited thick black liquid all over me. Ah! I jumped, screaming at the top of my lungs. But where did she go? I took a quick scan of the room. The lady was gone. It was like she never existed. God, what an awful dream. I should have gone slow on the wine. I drank a glass of water and calmed down my nerves. In the next few minutes, I was sure everything was nothing but a nightmare. But since that night, things began to get worse. Every night, I would wake up drenched in sweat with the same scary lady staring at me. After 3 nights, my health started deteriorating. I wanted to call the owner, but I was afraid that he would think I'd gone mad. I wasn't even sure if it was real or if I was hallucinating the entire thing. One afternoon, I was taking a bath. I had soap on my face and suddenly the shower turned off. As I searched for the tap to wash off my face, I grabbed something. It felt like a skinny hand. I got scared so badly that I slipped and fell into the bathtub. Luckily, I didn't break any bone. I had already paid 1 month's rent and hence didn't want to leave the place just because of some stupid hallucinations. But that night, my life changed forever. I was so terrified that I couldn't sleep for a long time, but eventually I dozed off. A sound of weeping woke me up. I got up on the bed expecting to see the lady like always, but this time she was standing at the doorway. She hid her face in her hands and her body trembled as she kept crying. What do you want?" She didn't answer. "Tell me what you want! I know I'm not hallucinating anymore! I know you're real!" The lady removed her hands from her face, and I saw she had no eyes. Her mouth stretched into this big, hollow jaw, and a distorted groan came out from it. My heart stopped beating, but then she did something unexpected. She slowly raised her bony hands and pointed her fingers at the long corridor. She stayed in that position for a few seconds and walked towards the corridor. I felt a weird sensation inside of me, as if an invisible force pushed me to follow her. I came out and saw her going downstairs. Her silhouette floated in the air as she made her way. She stopped near the basement door and turned towards me one last time. Her mouth opened again, and the same eerie groaning came out. She pointed at the padlock put on the basement door and vanished into thin air. Any other time I would have fainted right away, but this time I got her signal. She was trying to tell me something. Is there something in that basement? If not, then why is it locked? I broke the padlock with a big metal vase. As soon as I opened the basement door, a foul stench filled the house. No doubt it hinted towards rotten flesh. I grabbed a flashlight and with trembling footsteps made my way into the basement. At first, I didn't see anything, but the more I got closer, the smell hit me like a poisonous gas. Once the flashlight hit the corner of the basement, my legs froze into the ground. There was a dead body of an old woman decaying horribly. Her eyes had been eaten by maggots, and her mouth was opened into a silent scream. I was going to call the owner Steve, but I made another shocking revelation. On the basement wall hung a big laminated family picture of Steve standing beside the old woman, whose ghosts I've been seeing all these days. The picture was clear. Steve had murdered his mother and hid her body in the basement to get rid of it later. So instead of calling him, I called the cops. It took almost an hour for them to reach the remote lake house, but once they did, I felt relieved. I left the Airbnb right then and later read in the newspaper that Steve has been charged with first-degree murder of his mother. He admitted to killing her to acquire her wealth and the lake house which was in her name. Though I'm happy that I helped a trapped soul to get the justice she deserved, I still wake up at night having nightmares about that old creepy woman sitting on my bed, staring at me with her wide, hollow mouth opened into a silent scream. My name is Grace, and I love going for runs on the beach. There's something about the sound of the waves crashing against the shore that just makes me feel alive. I usually go about twice a week, and since I only live about 30 minutes away, there's no reason not to take advantage of it. When you see the sun setting, the beach looks like such a peaceful place, but at night, it takes on a whole different atmosphere. The waves seem louder, and the sand feels colder. I always make sure to bring a flashlight with me, just in case. Although I'm not the type to believe in stranger danger, I always get a little bit nervous when I'm running by myself at night. This is mainly exasperated by my roommates, and tonight was no different.
Don't go again, Gracie. Grace! You know when it gets dark, bad things happen. Katie, you know I'm safe, and you know I can take care of myself. I know, girlie, just be safe out there, and make sure you don't get carried away with your audiobooks.
She's always been the overprotective type, but I love her for it. After saying goodbye to Katie, I headed out the door and down to the beach. I started to run and everything was going great. The moon was out and the waves were crashing rhythmically against the shore. I was feeling good and getting lost in my thoughts. Whenever I run, I love listening to audiobooks or music. These things just feed my soul, and it's nice to be somewhere quiet for a while. As much as I love my roommates, it's nice to get some peace and quiet every now and then. I was so lost in my book that I didn't even realize I had veered off the path. When I looked up, I saw that I was on a part of the beach I had never been before. There were no houses or lights in sight. While my attention was caught up in the landscape, though, I failed to notice the object in my path. I stumbled and fell, hitting my head on something hard. Shining my flashlight towards the object, I discovered that it was a skeleton. And not just any skeleton. This one looked like it had been half buried in the sand. I scrambled to my feet, terror coursing through my veins. There must have been at least 10 skeletons lined up in a row. I had no idea what was going on, but I knew I needed to get out of there. I started running as fast as I could, but as I ran away from the line of skeletons in the sand, I felt a prickle on the back of my neck that caused me to turn around, looking behind me as I ran on the sand. As I did, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Around 10 yards behind me, I saw a dark and shadowy figure which was keeping pace with me, running slightly behind me and to my left. My heart was beating in my chest, so hard that I thought it might explode. I had no idea who or what was chasing me, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I sprinted as fast as my legs could carry me, finally making it back to an area of the beach that I recognized. Every time I looked behind me, though, I saw the shadowy figure was still there, running just a few steps behind me. I didn't know what to do or where to go. As the figure ran, I realized for some reason that I couldn't quite see its figure. It didn't make sense, since I'd always been incredible at night vision. The only thing I could think to do was run towards the nearest house and hope that someone would be home. The figure was still behind me as I pounded on the door of the house, screaming for help. Fortunately, someone must have heard me because the door opened and I fell into the house, panting and scared out of my mind. I looked back out the door to see if the figure was still there, but it was gone. Looking up, I saw the face of a kind but confused old lady who must have been the homeowner. I tried to explain what had happened, but I was so shaken up that I couldn't even form the words.
Someone was chasing me. I don't know. Someone was chasing me. It's okay, darling. You're safe now.
As I calmed down, I realized that I still had no idea what had happened. Who were those skeletons? And what was that shadowy figure that had been chasing me? As I sat shivering on her couch, however, I saw the old lady glance quickly toward her window located behind me. And as soon as I saw her eyes, I knew that whatever was out there, she had seen it too. She froze, her hand clasped at her chest, as I whirled around to see what had caught her attention. In the window, I saw the dark and shadowy figure, its eyes staring back at me from outside the window in the darkness of night. Whoever's eyes staring back at me weren't human. Maybe they were. Actually, I don't know. But they were a golden, sort of sick yellow, and they were inhumanly large. And as I stared back at them, I knew that this was the thing that had been chasing me. The old lady edged quietly near me, coming to a stand next to me as we both stared at the creature outside. It was just standing there, watching us with its eerie golden eyes. Right outside the window, the black figure stood, and it was the pure terror that I felt coursing through my veins as those eyes locked with mine. And then, it reached its hand out, its long and bony fingers clawing at the glass as if it wanted to come inside. The old lady grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the window. Her voice was shaking.
Get back, love! Now! What is it?
We shrunk back into the house as whatever it was continued clawing at the window, drawing with its long and bony fingers on the glass. When it was finished, a simple message read out on the window in a childlike scrawl. Run with me again. And like dust in the wind, the black figure gracefully leaped beyond the windowsill and was gone into the night. The old lady rushed to call the police, but they said that there was no trace of the creature by the time they arrived. I never went running on the beach at night again, and I never found out what those skeletons were, or what the shadowy figure was. But every time I close my eyes, I can still see its golden eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I think it wanted me to run with it one more time, but I don't like to think of what would happen after that. Maybe it just wanted to be friends, or maybe it wanted something more sinister. I'll never know for sure, but I do know that I never want to see it again. Hey guys, my name's James, and I have a story to tell you. It all started with me looking at Tinder profiles from bed. I was swiping through the different profiles quietly until something strange started to happen. All of the profiles had the name Mary. I started to scroll as fast as I could, but the profiles were still the same. No, they had something different. In the profile, there was a picture of a dead woman under some stairs, and every time I advanced on the profile picture, it looked closer and closer and closer. It was all a nightmare. Suddenly, I got a text from Tinder. It was Angela, the girl I had agreed to go on a date with. Angela was a nice girl. We had talked for about 2 weeks until I asked her for dinner, which she accepted without any problems. I didn't want to be late for my first date, so I changed, put on some perfume, and ran out. The date at the restaurant was going well, until Angela asked me questions about my past dates, and I had to tell her about Mary. Mary and I had been dating for several years, but one day, in the middle of an argument, she fell down the stairs. She died instantly. And that's what happened to Mary.
That's terrible, James. It's good that you're brave enough to come here and you can date again.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It just all happened so fast.
So, you want to replace me, James? James, what's wrong?
When I turned around, it wasn't Mary standing next to me, but the waitress. I'm sorry. I felt like I was dying of embarrassment. The whole restaurant was looking at me strangely, and I don't blame them. They probably think I'm crazy. Angela ignored what happened, saying that surely talking about Mary transported me to an ugly place and apologized. She's so nice. Anyway, we finished eating and we both went to my house. As soon as we arrived, Angela rushed over to me and gave me a passionate kiss. I hugged her as she gave it to me, but I couldn't help but open my eyes. In front of us was a huge mirror, and when I saw it, it wasn't Angela I was hugging. It was Mary. I panicked and pushed her away from me, but when I did, it was Angela again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have rushed in like that.
No, this is my fault, you see. I'm still not over what happened with Mary. You see, it's not as simple as I told you. The night of the fight, we were arguing. She lunged at me, and I pushed her. That's when she fell down the stairs.
Oh, I'm sorry. It must be very hard to live with that. But don't blame yourself. It was an accident. It could have happened to anyone, in any situation.
I know. Thank you. Angela, you're really supportive. Immediately, Angela hugged me, and we buried the subject. A while later, we were both in bed. It was 3 in the morning, and suddenly a Tinder message woke me up. I opened the message out of curiosity, and it was a message from Angela. She seemed very angry that we had missed our date at the movies. At that moment, I started to remember. I wasn't going to go to a restaurant. I was going with Angela to the movies. As the memory started to pop into my head, I remembered today's date. At the restaurant, at my house, everywhere. I was alone. Angela was never with me. Then, whose hand is on my chest now? Without warning, the monster began to savagely choke me. It had superhuman strength. This was not Mary. I didn't know who this monster was. I managed to kick her out of the way and ran to the exit door, but it was locked. I looked around in terror, but the monster was gone. Where are you? Leave me alone! Suddenly, the door behind me burst open, and before I could react, Mary grabbed me by the head and dragged me across the apartment to throw me violently against the window from my 3rd-floor apartment. As I fell to the floor in agony, my head clouded over and I began to remember again. I remember arguing with Mary at our house. Mary was furious because she checked my cell phone and saw that I was talking on Tinder with a girl named Angela. Suddenly, Mary pushed me angrily. I was the one who fell down the stairs. As I reached the bottom, I only remember Mary at the top of the stairs, crying and apologizing as she came down to help me. You're a monster! A monster! After that, I opened my eyes again. I was still in agony, but I had fallen from no apartment. I'm in an ambulance. I have a respirator in my mouth and I can't talk. I couldn't even move. The place is full of paramedics, but the only person I can see is Mary, who's in the ambulance in front of me, crying.
I'm sorry, James. I never meant for it to end like this. I swear, it was an accident. I'm a monster.
I thought that in a situation like this, my body would hurt a lot, but no, I don't feel anything. All I can do is look at Mary crying. I don't know if I'll survive this. If there's one reason I want to survive this, it's to talk to Mary. I want to tell her that it was an accident, that this was not her fault, that she's not a monster. Hi guys, my name's Michaela. I'm a manager at Wendy's. I can't say I love my job, but I don't mind it either. I like the environment, I get along well with my coworkers, and in general, I'm pretty comfortable. Everyone says I'm comfortable just because I'm the manager, but they're wrong. I have so much more work than everyone else. The real reason I'm comfortable is that I know what it's like to feel terrible, and I was during my first few months here. Not because I felt a lot of pressure, because it was my first job, or because I preferred to be at home. The real reason I was sick was that someone wanted to kill me. The day it all started, I had finished cleaning the bathrooms, and on my way out, I ran into Jonathan, the security guard. He had a letter in his hand and seemed to be looking for me. Hey, Michaela, I think this is for you. I found it on an empty table.
A letter? Are you sure it's for me?
I don't know many people named Michaela. He had a point. I've never met anyone named after me either.
Ooh, is it a love letter? Are you confessing to her?
It's not mine. Someone left it on the table.
I'm just teasing you, Johnny. I overheard the conversation. Hey, Mika, give me that. Hey, give that back. No way. I want to meet your secret admirer. Every day I watch you. Every day my heart dazzles looking at your eyes. Your golden hair shines, even held back by your Wendy's cap, when your smile invites me to be a part of your life. Okay, you should stop reading that. No way. I've been your secret admirer since the first time I saw you, since chance crossed our eyes the day you walked in for the first time. I'm in love with you. I know you're single, but I'm not interested in asking you out. I don't want to be another man in your life. I want to leave a mark on it forever, so... Okay, this is too much.
Keep reading. What does it say?
Let's see. Give me the letter. So, I will kill you.
Oh.
Mika, are you okay? No. Stay calm. We'll talk to someone.
Don't worry. I'll keep an eye on you. I won't let anyone come near you.
Thanks, guys.
For the next few days, everyone at Wendy's kept their eyes open. I felt like everyone was protecting me, and throughout the time, nothing was happening. I received a few more letters, but less and less frequently. Everything seemed to work itself out, until one day. That day, it was my turn to close. My other two colleagues left a moment before me as I had to finish closing the cash register. I wasn't worried, as I was confident that Jonathan would let me know if anything unusual happened. What I didn't expect was that it would actually happen. Mika, I don't want to alarm you, but you should hurry. Something strange is going on.
What's going on?
Come, look. When we went to the entrance, the door was already closed, but behind it, a man was standing. The man's clothes were in disarray. He was very tall and had a huge, unkempt beard. The gaze was piercing, and since I arrived, he just stared at me. I tried to tell him to go away, but he didn't answer me. Just stood there, staring. Michaela! Whoa!
That scared me. How does he know my name?
Suddenly, the man pulled out something from behind him. It was an axe.
Oh no!
This must be your secret admirer. I'll go in the back and call the police. You stay here and yell at me if he does anything weird.
Okay.
Jonathan ran out the back door, and I turned around to look for my attacker, but he was gone.
What? Where could he have gone? He was here just a second ago.
Ah!
Oh my god. Jonathan!
I ran towards Jonathan's voice, and there I could see them. Jonathan and my attacker were struggling at the back door. I ran to help him, but before I could do so, Jonathan was able to push him out the back door and quickly lock the door. Michaela! Looks like the boys forgot to lock this one.
Oh, Jonathan, he could have killed you. Are you alright?
Yeah, he didn't do anything to me. I managed to call the police. We'll be here for a while until they come.
Is it safe?
Yeah, he won't be able to get in. Let your parents know you're here and that you're safe. They get worried and come looking for you before the police get here. They might run into that psycho.
Yeah, good thinking.
Terrified, I called my parents and told them that everything was fine, that Jonathan was with me, and that the police were on their way. They were worried and wanted to come anyway, but they understood that if the psycho caught them, they would cause more trouble, so they just asked me to keep them in the loop. Hey, let me borrow your phone for a moment.
Yeah, do you have someone to call too?
Nope, I just have to stop you from talking to your parents again.
What?
Suddenly, and without warning, Jonathan threw the cell phone on the floor, breaking it immediately.
What have you done?
When I looked up to see him, his face had changed. He had a huge grin on his face, was moving his body nervously, and even worse, an obsessive look on his face that I'd never seen before.
Jonathan?
You are so innocent, Michaela. It was so easy to lock you up with me. Michaela! Michaela! You can stop shouting now, you'll get people's attention.
I don't understand. Who is he?
Just a homeless guy I paid for a little performance. Poor guy. Despite his height, he's a coward, but he's given it his all because he thinks I'll pay him more. If only he knew I'd frame him after killing you.
No! You know there are cameras here. You know the police will come.
Oh, come on, Michaela. I deactivated all the cameras. I never called the police, and thanks to your call, not only your parents won't come after you, but they will think I'm the hero who killed their daughter's murderer. Oh, I've waited so long for this. Every day I watch you. Every day my heart dazzles looking into your eyes. Your golden hair shines, even held back by your Wendy's cap, while your smile invites me to be a part of your life. As he was about to attack me, I managed to knee him in the testicles and took the moment to run away. I hid in the storage and quickly, I started to hear his voice. I love your spirit, Mika. And I'm not gonna lie to you, this cat and mouse game is really fun for me, but I have to call the police, so time is against me. Stepping out of the shadows, I tried to hit him as hard as I could, but he easily caught my hand.
In your dreams.
With my other hand, I punched him in the nose, which knocked him back. My secret admirer knew very little about my life, especially since I practiced martial arts as a girl. Anyway, the danger was not over. The man threw a knife at me, which I managed to dodge by falling to the ground. He tried to throw himself on top of me again, but this time he didn't count on anything. The same screwdriver he tried to use to kill me was next to me. You're dead, Michaela! As Jonathan spun around on the floor, I opened the back door and stepped out. Behind the door, the homeless man was staring at me. His gaze was not dangerous. It was a combination of surprise and fear. I looked back at him and he began to walk backward, losing himself in the night. After calling the police, Jonathan was arrested for attempted murder. Over time, and thanks to social media, many other similar allegations began to appear. No other girl could ever identify him, but this time Jonathan made a mistake. He harassed someone from his own work, someone who knew his real first and last name. Today, very few of my colleagues who still work with me know my story. Sometimes they want to tell it, but I forbid them to do so. I prefer that they're not scared, and then without them knowing it, someone is protecting them. When I was 13, my parents moved to a pretty rural area. I'd lived in the Bay Area my whole life and was pretty used to the city, so moving out into what felt like the middle of nowhere was quite a switch for me. One day, I decided to go exploring the woods. My parents told me multiple times not to go out there alone, but at that point, I had to get out. It was a hot day, and about 15 minutes into my walk, I was sweating like a pig. Little deer trails were carved out in the brush, snake skins, an old tire swing someone had set up in one of the trees, and beer cans. I finally reached the top of the hill and found an old abandoned church. The place looked like it had not had anyone in it for decades. I reached the front of the church and stepped up onto the porch. A set of wooden double doors with silver crosses embedded in the front of them greeted me. I grabbed the rusted handles and pulled. The heavy doors swung open, and my nose was immediately assaulted by a terrible smell. The best way to describe it would be decay, the smell of rotting wood, and flesh mingled together with a musty weight and summer heat. At this point, I should have just walked back up the hill and headed for home. Instead, I decided to power through and check the place out. I grabbed my handkerchief out of my pocket and tied it around my face. A pile of animal carcasses was heaped in the corner. A constant sound of metal rubbing on stone could be heard from inside the church. Suddenly, I heard a humming chorus coming from a close distance. The singing continued for a bit, and then it stopped. After that, a booming male voice began to chant. I was already freaked out, but the voice thoroughly scared the hell out of me. It sounded like some Old Testament preacher you see in the movies, but again, it was like he was speaking in a different language because I couldn't understand a single word. Eventually, it got to where the single male voice would say something, and then a bunch of voices would answer in song. This lasted for a while, and then they all broke into this long, sustained wail that kept getting louder. It got so loud and so disturbing that I covered my ears. Then it stopped. I peeked into the chapel and my stomach dropped. Inside the chapel, there stood a group of people wearing white cloaks, humming this weird tune all together. Maybe a dozen or so candles were placed on shelves lining the stone walls. On the altar in front of them laid down a dried human body. There was no doubt the corpse was months old. I couldn't tell if it was a woman or a man, but the sight gave me chills. I could tell the disciples of this abandoned church are the followers of the Dark Lord, or else why would they sing ominously in front of a dead body? 5 huge white goats were tied in the corner. One of the followers picked up a bowl from the altar and walked towards those goats. The bowl had some thick, darkish liquid in it, which seemed like blood to me. One by one, the man smeared the goat's white fur with that liquid. The poor animals bleated in fear. They could probably sense something bad was about to happen to them. Once the goats were marked with that suspicious liquid, another man picked up a huge scythe and started chanting in some weird language. Sanguis bibimus corpus edibus! Sanguis bibimus corpus edibus! The entire group then screamed, "Hail Satan! Hail the Dark Lord!" In front of my eyes, the man with the scythe slaughtered the goats one by one. The floor of the church drowned in blood. I was horrified by this scene. Suddenly, a voice spoke from behind.
Do you like what you see?
Turning around, I was face to face with this old woman on the floor. She only had her upper torso, balancing on her frail, skinny hands. I tried to answer, but my voice froze in my throat, and my instincts told me to try and run. Without a word, I broke into the fastest sprint I could muster. The woman chased me like some unknown creature. She was running on her hands, and damn, she was fast.
Stop! Don't be afraid! Join us! Whatever I did for him! He may have taken half of my body, but I still survived! Believe in his miracle! The Dark Lord taketh! The Dark Lord giveth! Stop! You foolish kid!
But I didn't flinch. Once I was past the gate, I turned around one last time and saw the woman panting and watching me with creepy eyes. She wasn't chasing me anymore. Wiping the sweat off her forehead, she said,
He will decide your fate.
I ran down the hill at some point. My sight went black as I slipped into unconsciousness. It was 2 days before I woke up in the hospital. My parents and the police questioned me endlessly, asking what had happened, and I told them the story I just told you. They, of course, didn't believe me, at least not the part about the thing I had encountered in the church basement. The police did go looking for the church and the woman I had described. They found the empty, abandoned church, and nothing else. But the story doesn't end here. A week after this incident, when I was finally getting back to being normal, I saw that woman again. I was sitting in my backyard watching the sunset when I heard a chuckle nearby. I turned my head, and there she was, standing under a tree at some distance. Only she was different this time. She had a complete human body and looked strikingly young. She wore a red gown with her hair all curly and shiny. Her skin was pale, but all the wrinkles were gone. Her glassy blue eyes hardly blinked. She waved at me and said,
I told you, the Dark Lord taketh, the Dark Lord giveth. There's still time. Join us.
I screamed for my mom.
Mom! Mom, she's here! She's back!
In a wink, she was gone. I didn't know if she vanished or dissolved into the ground, but she was gone. It's been 15 years now. I don't understand how she regenerated her body and her age, but I pray I never see her again. No one believes a word I say regarding this, but my memory of the event will never change. I'm waiting for my flight right now. I'm leaving this country and never coming back. Don't get me wrong, Vietnam is a beautiful place. I came here because I'm a huge foodie and I love trying new things. But this particular trip was a disaster for me and my husband, and it's all because of our Airbnb. We were only in Vietnam for a few days, but we wanted to make the most of it, so we decided to stay in an Airbnb instead of a hotel. I was scrolling through the Airbnb listings, looking at different houses, when I settled on something incredible.
Hey, Henry, come take a look at this.
What is it, hon? I showed him the pictures of the house on Airbnb. It was an old traditional-style house that was on sale. At the moment, it was only being used as an Airbnb. It's beautiful, but why is it so cheap?
I don't know. Maybe because it's old?
I shrugged. I didn't really care why. This looked awesome. We decided to book it. So I put in the booking and soon received a message from the owner. It seemed to be an automated confirmation message, accepting our booking. The next few days flew by in a blur. We landed in Vietnam, took a taxi to the address of our Airbnb, and arrived at the house. It was even more incredible in person. It was huge, and it had a beautiful garden. The inside of the house was even better. It was luxurious, and it smelled amazing. We were greeted by the owner, who showed us around the house. The owner was an old man, his eyes slightly crisscrossed, his smile a little too wide, but he seemed harmless enough. After he had given us a tour, the owner departed, muttering something about some errands he had to do. He didn't speak English very well, so I wasn't quite sure what he had to say. As soon as he had departed, my husband turned to me. "So what do you think?"
I think this place is amazing. I can't believe how lucky we are.
"I know, babe. Want to go check out the bedroom again?" The bedroom was especially beautiful. It had high, vaulted ceilings, and the bed was huge. We were both exhausted from our flight, so we decided to go to sleep early. Getting cozy in bed, I settled in. I heard snoring beside me, and I realized that my husband was already sound asleep. Pulling a book from the nightstand, I began to read. It must have been at least 30 minutes before the first sound, a scratching noise, like something was crawling on the roof. I ignored it, thinking it was just an animal. But the noise persisted, and I finally got out of bed to look. Opening the window, I looked out. I didn't see anything. Sighing, I went back to bed and soon fell asleep. Before I did, however, I glanced at my phone to check the time. It was only 7 p.m. I was woken up by a loud crashing noise. It sounded like something had fallen downstairs. I got out of my bed, heart racing. My husband had been jolted awake by the noise as well.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. Stay here. I'm gonna go check it out.
I'm coming with you.
We got out of bed, and he held up his phone for a flashlight. The windows were pitch black, and I couldn't see a single thing. The only thing I could see was his bright phone screen, but something about it seemed off.
Honey, did you update your phone's time before we came here?
Of course. Why?
Your phone. Why does the time say 8 a.m.?
He frowned and looked at his phone. As he stared at the phone, I glanced toward the window again, half expecting it to be daytime, the birds singing and the sun shining, but it remained dark outside. Huh, that's weird, babe. Maybe the time changed overnight or something.
But it was only 7 p.m. when we went to bed.
My voice trailed off as I realized how long we had been asleep. Suddenly, I turned toward the window, walked over to it, and tried to throw it open like I had last night. But as I did, I realized something. It had been boarded up from the outside. Turning toward my husband, I saw the look on his face and realized that he too had noticed.
Let's try the door. Maybe there was maintenance while we were sleeping?
He nodded in agreement, and we walked downstairs. But when we got there, we found that the door too had been boarded up. We had forgotten all about the noise, but suddenly I heard it again. A loud scratching noise, like something was crawling across the roof. But this time, it didn't come from the roof. It came directly from the bedroom that we had left. I shined my phone up the stairs, peering into the darkness, and that was when I saw it. A gigantic pair of eyes, shining yellow in the darkness, a long forked tongue that flicked out, tasting the air, and a huge coiled body, easily filling up the entire staircase. A snake, blocking our only escape. We were both frozen in fear, not knowing what to do. But then, the snake began to move, slowly sliding down the stairs toward us. "Run!" my husband shouted, and we both ran in opposite directions. I ran into the kitchen, thinking that I could find something to defend myself with. But as I looked around, I realized that the knives had all been removed. The drawers were empty. At that moment, however, I heard screams from the other room. It was my husband's voice, and it was coming from the direction he had run. "Help! Someone help me!" Not thinking, I ran toward him, my heart in my throat. But as I got closer, the screams stopped. Throwing open the door, I shone my light inside, and there, on the floor, was my husband's lifeless body, and next to him was that snake, its huge body coiled around him. I wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything, but I was frozen in place, my mind blank. It was then that the snake turned towards me, hissing and baring its fangs. My body finally sprung into action, and I turned, running up the stairs into the bedroom. I could hear the snake hissing behind me, getting closer and closer. I reached the bedroom and slammed the door shut, grabbing a nearby chair and lodging it against the door. As I did, however, I noticed the attic door located in the corner of the room. Bursting through, I saw light. It was distant, but it was light. I ran through the attic towards the light, bursting out into the roof of the building. I didn't know how I had gotten there, but I didn't care. I was glad to be alive. I got into the car we had rented and drove away toward the police station. As I drove, I looked into my rearview mirror and saw the old man standing in front of his house. His face was twisted into a smile, and he waved at me. The police told me that they had looked at the house. They said everything was normal and they refused to take any legal action. But I know I came here with my husband. I know that I was left alone. And I know what I saw. This happened a few weeks ago, but I'm having trouble processing the following events. I went for a solo trip to the Gulf of Mexico. I'm a huge outdoor sports fanatic. I've learned to swim by 4 and can operate any water vehicle, be it manual or automatic. Most of my trips are ocean-centric because I also have a knack for night fishing. Why at night? Because it's quiet and effective. Fishes eat the baits easily, and due to the peaceful ambiance, I can concentrate well. So, I drove to the beach, parked my car, and sat on the ocean with my canoe. Being the middle of winter, it was chilly. The temperature was hovering a few degrees above zero, but with the swirling wind, it felt colder. The water was calm, so I paddled my canoe to find a good spot near the rocky surfaces. The moon was shining bright that night. I had a torch in my helmet, but wasn't going to light it until it felt necessary. The moonlight made the surroundings visible. I brought a small flask filled with whiskey to keep me warm. The ocean was at its best behavior, so I thought to go out a little far. The trees were bowing down on the salty water. I was loving the solitude like the world was only mine at that moment. Just when I was starting to think, I saw a winding area going into the shore. I realized I had found a creek. Those who know about fishing can understand creeks are the best place to anchor your boat. Fishes gather in the creeks for night rest, hence there's enough possibility to catch some. Without wasting a single second, I row my canoe to the small creek. The sandy shore stood on both sides with trees and bushes guarding the area. I got down from the canoe and pulled it halfway to the shore. The boat was half on the water and half on the creek shore. I sat down facing my back to the trees and bushes and began fishing. I had been to many unknown islands and found secret beaches in the ocean while searching for fish, and all those places were secluded and stranded, but this particular creek was a little too quiet. The sounds of the ocean didn't reach this area. Generally, there'd always be some kind of night bird or insect presence to announce its existence, but here, it was a drop-dead silence. The air also felt a little too cold. I zipped my jacket and took a few sips of whiskey to adjust my body to the sudden drop in temperature. For the next 15 minutes, nothing happened. 2 times the fish caught the bait, but because of pulling the fishing rod too early, I lost it. I was preparing for the 3rd time when I suddenly heard a humming sound of a female voice. I quickly looked behind because it was unexpected. A woman singing in this stranded creek at this hour of the night was next to impossible. Her voice echoed, but I couldn't see her. I kept staring behind me thinking she was walking on the shore and at some point will surface from the bushes, but that didn't happen. Suddenly, the humming stopped, and I felt a pull on the fishing rod. I turned my head to the front and saw a woman partially submerged in the water right, inches away from my canoe. Her body from the waist down was completely under the water, and I was shocked to see her resisting the cold. She wore a pink dress which had a big blood stain on the chest. Her disbelieving blonde hair was filled with mud and sand. She had a pale face with big grayish eyes and a sick smile. Seeing her was unexpected, so I forgot to speak for a while. Seeing me shocked and confused, she let out a weird chuckle.
Did you catch any?
I stuttered. No, not yet. Did she not understand how strange the entire scenario is? Why are you all right? I couldn't help but ask. She stopped smiling and then looked at the sky.
They're coming back again.
Who's coming? She didn't answer and just kept staring at me blankly. I asked again, "Ma'am, you need to get out of this cold water. How did you even end up here?"
I was dropped off.
Were you on some ship? Her face changed. She got sad and nodded her head from left to right.
My husband left me here last night.
You've been here since last night? She nodded her head up and down. I was stunned to know this. The fact that she had survived this cold weather without any food or water seemed so confusing to me. I was about to give her my hand so she could come out of the water and sit on my canoe when she suddenly started swimming to the other side of the creek. Ma'am, where are you going?
I need to protect. I must protect. They're coming back.
She hovered into the bushes, 1 foot bare, while the other wore a bloody yellow stiletto. She could barely walk wearing one shoe. As soon as she disappeared into the bushes, I saw a flock of nightbirds, probably crows, flying above. They were all heading to the same side of the creek where the woman went. I couldn't sit and wait anymore. I too got out of the boat and swam to the other side to follow the woman. I could hear the cawing of the crows from across. They were hoarsely grunting and screaming, which felt pretty mysterious. I know a thing or two about animal behavior, and I was certain that this was something the flock of birds had found on this island. Soon, in 5 minutes, I discovered them. Under a tall palm tree, the crows had gathered. They were sitting on something lying on the sand and feeding off it. Flesh and strings of meat were hanging from their beak. A foul stench was choking the air. It was only surprising that a reeking smell like this didn't reach me all this time. For the first time, I turned on the flashlight attached to my helmet, and what I saw made my heart flung to my throat. The crows were feasting on a dead body. I could only see the feet of the dead body, which were enough for me to understand who it belonged to. 1 foot was bare, while the other had a bloody yellow stiletto on it. I felt like fainting. I wanted to scream, but my voice died down. Suddenly, a translucent apparition of the woman I had just met appeared in the air. I couldn't spot her face, but I did see her glowing eyes. She slowly lifted her hand and pointed at the morbid feasting of the night crows. A rolling sound of painful sobbing echoed all over the creek, and I couldn't take it anymore. I ran back to my canoe, didn't bother to take my fishing rod, and rowed back to the beach. I don't remember how I mastered the courage to come back, but once I did, I went straight to the local police station. I reported about finding the dead body. I had to go back with them to help them identify the exact area. The story unfolded that a man murdered his wife and dropped her body in the stranded creek to get rid of it. The rotting body attracted insects and animals, hence being discovered in a mutilated condition. I never saw that woman again. Now, I realize the underlying meaning of the woman's words, that she was dropped off after her husband killed her. Her tormented spirit couldn't leave the body because she wanted to protect it from the flock of crows. All she wanted was to be found. The fact that I accidentally ended up going to the same creek where people hardly go is nothing but a coincidence. But one thing is sure, I am never going to the ocean at night, ever again. Whenever I recall the memory of that night, I get choked on fear. It was the end of December and the snowfall had been pretty heavy. I was sitting in my room playing games on my computer. My parents were both out. Having the house to myself, I decided to try something spooky. I had recently heard about the dark web from my friends. My best friend Noah said it's a creepy place. He even mentioned a cannibal forum where interested human meat-eaters chat about their insane fantasies. I logged into the Tor browser that helps you to access the deep web. I found some hitman hiring pages, a few creepy torture videos, and then finally, an explicit explicit site where the content was gruesome and sickly. I was about to go watch a scary movie, not finding anything scary enough, when suddenly a link popped up saying, "Not for the faint-hearted. Click if you dare. Exclusive live." Without thinking, I clicked. I still regret that decision. A dark screen flashed. The word live blinked in the top left corner. For a second, the darkness stayed, and then a white spotlight lit up, flashing a woman standing in the middle of a kitchen. Her hair was put down on the front, hiding her face. She wore a dirty white patient uniform with mud stains. The kitchen was filthy as hell. Piles of dishes were stacked in the sink, cobwebs hanging everywhere. I could see the cockroaches walking all over the walls. What caught my attention most was the old stroller she was holding onto. It was like one of those Rosemary's Baby types, only dustier and more unclean. Suddenly, a baby's cry took place. I realized it was coming from the stroller. I couldn't see the baby, but its cry was very hoarse. What the hell is all this? I murmured to myself, when a creepy lullaby began to play in the room. I couldn't tell if it was coming from a music box or some other sound device. The woman started to rock the cradle slowly with the music. It felt so creepy to watch. Her black long hair made it impossible to see her face, yet at the same time I felt she was looking at me. She then started to talk to the baby.
Calm down, little angel. Stop crying.
I was flabbergasted by the sight. The more she talked, the baby's cry got louder.
No. Stop crying. If you don't, I will have to punish you.
What? What the F is she saying? Her grip on the candle got stronger, and she started rocking it a little too fast, but the baby still kept crying.
So, you won't stop, huh? Looks like you've made up your mind.
She stopped rocking it and let go of the stroller. She then turned to her right and picked up something from the floor. Once her hands hit the light, I saw what it was. She was now holding a glass jar with a metal lid on it. The contents of the jar seemed to be moving. Drops of sweat appeared on my forehead once I figured out what the hell was in that jar. Hundreds of red, big fire ants crawling inside the jar. Bloody hell, is this woman insane? The woman suddenly parted her hair, revealing her partial face. The camera zoomed onto her face and it gave me nightmares. She had big green eyes bulging out of the eye socket, and her skin was infectious. I'm sure it wasn't makeup because it looked real. Scratches and pus-filled wounds were all over her cheeks. Her face was scratched with nails badly. She smiled and put her finger on her lips.
Shh. Time to put the baby to sleep.
The cry of the baby was almost dying down when she opened the lid of the jar, put her hand in it, and grabbed a handful of fire ants. The ants were probably biting her too, but she didn't even flinch, not for a single second. And then I watched the horror happen. She started dropping those ants inside the cradle. The cry got louder with each ant. I was feeling traumatized. I wanted to quit life, but my fingers were frozen on the keyboard. Is this happening to Liv?
Oh no! You just got louder!
She screamed like she didn't expect that to happen. Everything about her behavior was so psychotic. She smashed the jar on the floor. The sound of breaking glass numbs my ears. Again, she turned to her right and picked something up from the dark corner. This time, she had a blowtorch in her hand. Holy Mother of God! Is she going to set the stroller on fire? Before I could contemplate it, she torched the stroller. A cloud of smoke, rising flames of fire, gobbled the stroller immediately. The cry grew the loudest, and then slowly began to die down. The woman laughed.
Sleep, little angel.
Sleep in peace.
I couldn't watch it anymore. I left the site, but then a few glitches appeared on the screen and took me to another page. It was a chat box, and I saw someone labeled as the mother typing. A text appeared on the screen.
Someone is knocking on your door. Why don't you open it?
A cold shiver rushed down my spine. With trembling hands, I typed back, "Is this a joke?" No reply came. I waited in silence. My heart was racing when suddenly, loud banging appeared on the main door. The banging soon changed into kicking, and then the crazy press of our doorbell. I screamed, "Leave me alone or I'm calling 911!" I plugged off my computer. It finally turned off, and just then, the banging stopped too. I could barely breathe. It felt like I was having a heart attack. 10 minutes later, when I finally got my courage back, I slowly walked to the entrance. I peeked outside from the eye hole and only saw the deserted street and dimly lit lamppost. I slowly opened the door. Someone has left a cardboard box on my porch. I opened it and screamed. Ah! There was a mutilated doll of a baby. Ants were crawling on it, and its burnt face made me jump. I threw the box outright and locked the door. The whole night I remained awake until my parents got home. I couldn't tell them about this incident because I knew they won't believe me. I still remember the note I found inside that box. It read,
Next time, it won't be a doll.
I opened my laptop. It was a dreary day, and it had been raining for what felt like weeks. I needed to talk to someone. I needed to feel connected to the outside world. I went to my usual chat site, Omegle. Omegle was what I used when I wanted to meet people, make friends, and feel like I wasn't alone in the world. It was anonymous, which was perfect for me. I didn't have to worry about anyone knowing my name or where I lived. Of course, I knew where everyone else lived. I had a plugin that gave me the IP address of everyone I chatted with. As I waited for the first user to connect, I traced the IP of the last person I chatted with. St. Louis, Missouri. Not too far away, actually. The first user connected, and I smiled.
"Hey there, how are you today?" "I'm good, thanks for asking. How about you?"
It was a bald man with not a hair on his head. He had no real defining features, no beard, no facial hair, and no real distinguishing marks. What was interesting, however, was his eyes. One eye was blue and the other was green. It was quite unnerving.
"I'm good, just a little bored." "Bored, huh? Well, I'm sure we can fix that. What's your name?"
I hesitated. I didn't want to give away my real name.
"You can call me John." "John, huh? Well, it's nice to meet you, John. I'm Andy."
Andy didn't seem like a threat. He was just a regular guy chatting on Omegle. We talked for a while, about nothing in particular. He asked me about my hobbies, and I asked him about his. Eventually, the conversation turned to more personal things.
"So, John, what do you do for a living?" "I'm a student." "Oh? What are you studying?"
I hesitated again. I didn't want to tell him the truth. I didn't want to tell anyone the truth.
"I'm studying history." "Interesting. I've always been fascinated by history. What's your favorite period?"
What was a period? I fidgeted in my seat, my mind racing.
"All of them."
Andy laughed.
I like your enthusiasm, but I can tell you're not being truthful with me, John.
I swallowed. I looked at my plugin. I'd see where he lived, and I could decide what to do from there. As I looked at the plugin, though, I felt a weird sensation running through my body. It was like someone had poured ice water down my spine. My plugin was glitching, with weird lines running across the screen, and then it went blank.
"What the hell?"
I said aloud. It had never done this before, and I felt as if I was being watched. I looked at my computer's monitor cable, checking the connection. It seemed fine.
"John?"
Andy asked, but his voice sounded different this time, and when I raised my head back to look at the screen, he was nowhere to be seen.
John, do you know what happened 2 years ago on the day?
What the heck?
John, do you remember what you did 2 years ago on the day your sister disappeared?
My heart stopped. My sister had been missing for 2 years, and the police had never been able to find her. They had ruled her missing.
What the heck do you want from me? It's not what I want, John. It's what she wants.
I felt a cold hand touch my shoulder, and I spun around, my heart racing. My sister was standing behind me, her eyes cold and dead. Her black, soulless eyes sprouted from a decaying body wearing nothing but a shabby white robe. The blood from where I had stabbed her pooled around her feet, and the knife was still in her hand.
Sarah?
Hello, brother. They never found out what you did to me, did they? But I know. I remember when you killed me. I remember everything.
I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to run, but my legs were like lead. I was paralyzed with fear. I stared at her and let out another involuntary scream as I saw the man from the camera, the man I had been chatting with, staring at us from the doorway of my room. His eyes seemed to glow as he watched, a satisfying grin spreading across his face. And then Sarah raised the knife and started towards me. I felt blood rush to my head, and I finally managed to move. I struggled backward toward the corner of my room where I grabbed for my knife. Sarah was upon me before I could even stand up. She stabbed me in the leg, and I screamed in pain. The man from the doorway just watched, still grinning. I managed to stand up and face her. I was bleeding heavily from my leg, but I could barely feel it. All I felt was the overwhelming anger for my sister, my dead sister who stood before me.
You deserved to die! You deserved it! They never gave me attention after you were born! They always loved you more!
She lunged at me again, and I sidestepped her. I grabbed my knife from the corner of the room and held it out in front of me.
Stay back! Just stay back!
Sarah just laughed and kept coming. I stabbed her in the stomach, but it didn't even faze her. She just